Welcome back. We are now going to move the create gist function into the gist API client. If you look at it, the create gist function would get the complete gist that's created back, and the most important item there would be the ID. We're going to return an ID back. That is something we also need in the delete function. So let's create that function here. Public string create gist. The gist needs the payload, so that's going to be a string payload as an input parameter. We need the same spec that we built here. We don't need the payload part, we can remove that, and then at the end we need this call here. Paste everything here. We need to remove this payload part because that's going to be an input to this function now, and what we need to do is we need to return something back from it. So we return this dot extract dot path ID. This is the function for creating a gist, exactly how it was written there. If we wanted to try this out here, what we need to do is we need to first comment this part out. We don't need the spec builder, and we don't need the rest assured calls here. We don't need to create the payload, and now we're going to use that payload in gist API client dot create gist, and the input payload is the payload we created here. How the test is currently, this is the complete test. It does return an ID. We don't need that ID right now, so let's see if this test works. It looks like the test has worked. Let's take a look at the debug logs that we have here. Post method on /gists with this payload, and its response is at 201. You do get an ID out. Our test is done here. We can delete all of this commented code out, and this is our new test. Now this test, again, as the idea is, does not know how the payload is used to create a gist. All it needs to know is this is a gist that has been created. The next step would be to create the delete gist part and actually reuse this code in the next test. That's what we're going to do next. Now it's time to modify the delete gist test. We'll still need this payload. We are going to just move it up here in create a gist section. What is this thing doing? It's creating a gist based on this payload, and we know that we already have a method to do this. The method is in gist API client. We are going to send this payload to the create gist function. Gist API client dot create gist with the given payload, and we're going to get the same string called ID created from this. So that part is done. The next part is the delete gist part, and that's the part of code that we are going to use in our API client. So we need to create a function. It's going to be void because deleting the gist does not return anything. It's going to require a string parameter called ID. That's the ID of the gist. Now this is going to require the same spec builder, which is going to have the authorization header. So we need to copy that part here. And if you tell me right now that you are reusing this code again and again in different methods, yes, that's the next refactoring we're going to do. For now, let's just create this function. This uses ID created, but here the parameter we use is called ID. We change that, and that's our delete gist function. We are going to call that now here. So we're going to comment this part out, and we're going to use gist API client dot delete gist with the ID created variable that we got here. We're going to get this list of IDs, and we already have a function for this. So we're going to comment this part out, and we're going to get this variable now from gist API client dot get users IDs, and the username has to be provided here. We're going to call it ID retrieved. I think I had a spelling mistake here. So let's correct that and correct that here as well. So our test now knows nothing about how the API is being called. If the method here that we created to delete gists actually does the job it needs to do. Let's find the method declaration here and we're going to run the test here. Good, the test has run. Just to be sure, we make a post to /gists with this payload. We create that gist. In the next step, we delete the gist and we get a 204 back. That's very good. We get the list of gists again for this user, and in that list we're going to get a number of gists here, but not the one that we have recently deleted. So our test now works. We are going to clean up this code, everything that we commented out that we don't need, and then we're going to look at how simple the test looks. So given a gist that has been created here, when I delete the gist, I deleted this line, and then this should be deleted. So here we get that list of IDs and we assert that it's not in the list of IDs, the one that we just deleted. Now if you look at this test file, it looks really simple. It's easy to write tests on. It's easy to extend and create new tests. When you have a nice API client here that does all the heavy lifting of talking to the API and giving you the results you want. So these are the three methods as we had explained in beginning in the diagram, have been created here in the API client file, and those functions are now used in our tests to call and then interact with the API. In the next steps, we're going to see that we have a very static payload that we are creating here, and that's something that we want to randomize. It's always nice to have some random test data. That's going to be the next iteration. Also, what we see is we are reusing a lot of code here. That's something that we are going to clean up in our next step.